Okay, so this is something I'm going to try out and I've toyed with for a while. Tangled Webs Episode 1, which is basically going to be a monthly series where I just go over some of the stuff that's going on as far as my collection's concerned. So for this first episode, we're going to look at the Balfouri Communal update. We're going to look at featured tarantula. There'll be one every month. This time it's B. cabocla. We have Tidbits, which this time around is just Molts, but could be anything that's going around that I've caught video of that I think would be interesting, but it's kind of short and would make for a good video by itself. And then Question of the Month, where I take a question that's asked either through my website or through YouTube and answer it. And hopefully this is something people enjoy. If you do, please let me know. I'd like to do these monthly, and I have some other ideas for it, but I don't want to spend the time if it's something people aren't going to bother watching or don't care about. So here goes. Okay, here's the July update for the Balfouri Communal. As I pretty much anticipated, they've started digging their burrows and webbing up. This is the back of the enclosure, so you can see there one of the burrows. It's all webbed up top. Originally, they went down and dug underneath the whole thing, and then at night, it'd come out and occasionally catch one webbing the entrances. And you can see the webbing runs all the way back across the statue. And here's the front, where we can see, if you notice, the ground has been kind of upheaved. That's because there's burrows going all underneath those as well. So pretty much what I was expecting, and I'm kind of excited to see them start digging and making this new tank their home. They settled in very, very quickly. They've eaten several times, and there was actually at least 5 molts within a week of me putting them in here. So cool on one end of the spectrum. Another end of the spectrum, I was really terrified when I did the rehousing that I was going to catch somebody molting, which would have been horrible. Luckily, I timed it correctly, so good thing they're going to be in here for a while. And here, Billy and I are feeding some. These are male racers, B-lats, or runners. I always call them the wrong thing. And as you can see, we have one out here that just molted, little tiny abdomen that has no problem sitting out in the open eating. This one stays here the entire time. The majority of them, though, are quite timid and will not come out when the light's on them. So what I have to try to do is get in there at night and try to get some footage of them feeding. The problem is I take the whole tank out when I feed them, and it's in the bright light of my dining room because I like to have some room to work, do my husbandry, pull out any boluses, molds, clean the water dish, and it's tough to do where it is on the shelf under the red lighting. So we'll see. We'll figure out some way to try to catch these guys hunting. Unfortunately, one of them made a grab over to the right, and we didn't catch it. We were trying to catch one of them popping out, and it just didn't happen. But these roaches the next day were gone. You couldn't find them anywhere. I believe I dropped in 12. There are 9 Balfouri in there for people that are just joining this series or seeing the first communal video. So, and there were 9 when I transplanted them all, so they're all still doing well, and they tend to munch these things up pretty well. So next time I feed them will be later on, probably later on this week, so I'll try to get some footage then. Hopefully I can entice some of these guys to come out and make a grab, because it is kind of cool, and I catch it every so often. But keep in mind, I live with these guys. I'm constantly observing them, and I don't catch them eating that much. So my goal is to try to get some good video of them all coming out, scrambling and grabbing up the roaches or crickets or whatever I choose to drop in. And over here in the back, we thought we were going to have 2 come out and hunt. The roaches are trying to go down in their dens over there, and 2 of them came out, but then they quickly went back in. So Balfouris are still doing great. As you can see, lots more webbing up there, and this will continue to grow. For people that worry that their spiders aren't webbing, please keep in mind webbing takes months. A lot of webbing takes months. I have GBBs that have been webbing now for a year, and it takes that long to really get those copious amounts of white in your enclosures. So doing great. We're going to be talking about one of the cooler species I keep, the B. cabocla, or Brazilian redhead. Like many of our popular species, these guys come from Brazil. They hold a lot of tarantula life there, specifically the Amazonica state of Roraima, Brazil. And temperatures here run anywhere from 70s to 90s. It's a rather warm area, but the big question was whether to keep them moist or dry. They actually have a rainy season from May to August where they get tons of rain, and then a dry season from October to March where they actually get less than an inch, sometimes 0.2 inches of rain. So either way is technically correct. As slings, I did keep them on the moist side while they were smaller. I basically did my trick where I have, if you can see here, the first enclosure I had them in was one of those dram bottles. I kept the bottom levels moist, top levels I allowed to dry out a bit, and they did do some burrowing. So these enclosures make pretty good enclosures for them because they're taller, they give them some burrowing space, and they're smaller because these are teeny tiny slings. And you could also keep them in the popular deli cups. The 2-ounce would probably be enough room because they are teeny tiny slings, but for a larger one or even a smaller one, you could use the 16-ounce variety. Once they put on some size, and it did take them a while to reach the juvenile size, about 2 years to get 2.5, 3 inches or so, then one of the Exoterra breeder boxes makes a great enclosure for one and would probably hold one to sub-adulthood, maybe even adulthood. They're a tiny, smaller spider at about 4 inches to 5 inches or so. Or critter keepers make great homes for them. I have one of them in a critter keeper right now. It's about 4 inches, 4.5 inches, and it has plenty of space. One thing that's kind of cool about this species is that they do start to get their adult coloration rather early on, at about an inch, as you saw in the video before. That spiderling was about an inch long or so. They start picking up that red carapace and the darkened limbs. This is a rather unique looking tarantula because of the sharpness of its appendages and its legs. Almost looks like a true spider. You'd be kind of shocked if I showed you a picture of these guys just sitting out to find out that they were a tarantula, because they just really do have that true spider look to them, which I find rather unique. And the coloration is fantastic. Here's one taking down a roach. Feeding response on these guys once they get a little larger is fantastic. One thing I did notice is that as slings, they were a bit skittish as far as prey was concerned. They tend to be scared off by live prey, even when I put in some really teeny tiny stuff. So pre-killed may be the way to go if you're raising really small spiderlings of this species. As they put on some size, maybe 1.5 inches or so, that seemed to go away, that apprehension, and they seem to take things no problem. Another thing I noticed about this species, having raised them at 2 different times, is when I first got my slings, my tarantulas were kept in the 70s almost all year round, with dips to 70 or even 68 in the winter time. So the growth rate on these guys was rather slow during those periods. However, when I got my next 2, one of them was actually a young adult and one of them was a sling, they grew much, much faster, and I think in part due to the fact that my temperatures at that point were higher. At the winter, I started using a heater, so I had temperatures in the mid-70s, and the summers, we had a particularly warm summer where temperatures got into the 80s in that tarantula room, and I noticed they grew a lot faster. So again, it's not going to hurt them to have them growing slower. You'll have your tarantula longer, but just be aware that your growth rate might vary if you keep them on the cooler side. Another interesting point is that they do not web barely at all. You can see this one here has no webbing in its enclosure. This one will be getting rehoused soon, and you have to love the reddish color of those carapace. It's just beautiful. So if you're looking for a heavy webber, this isn't your tea. As adults, I keep mine on dry substrate. I give them full water dishes at all times. They're very quick usually to fill them up with dirt and sub. That said, I've also will overflow the water dish or moisten down a corner, and they've shown absolutely no preference toward the moist corner. Sometimes you get spiders that will zone right in on that moist spot and take residence there, and you know that they appreciate it. These guys do not. So not a spider you have to worry about so much in terms of husbandry. And as far as temperament, they're a little bit skittish, but not a big deal. I've never seen a threat posture. I've never had a hair kicked on me, so this could be a nice little beginner species. So here we go, the bee cabocla, one of the cooler spiders available, tarantulas available, and just I think a great addition to any collection, just very unique looking and something that will definitely stand out when you show people your favorite tarantulas. All right, just a quick update on my Lasiodora parahybana female, my big girl, just molted. Really excited about this one because it's one of my bigger spiders now. I'll be taking the molt in a moment, which is right over here, and stretching it out, seeing how big she is to get an idea how big, large she is now after the molt. But beautiful girl. I love the colors on these guys after they molt. Hopefully this is coming out really well. She's looking gorgeous. Already kicked a hair at me. I had to move her water dish and change her water dish. But I picked this one up on my birthday, I think. I think my wife got it for me. 3 years ago, and she was about 3 inches. So I'll be curious to see how big she is now. She's definitely the largest of my LPs. I have several of them. Apparently me standing over the table with the cameras brought the dogs out, which is all that noise in the background. Gorgeous, gorgeous girl. And you can see the pinkish hairs that give it its name, salmon bird eater. Let me back up a little bit. You can get an idea how big she is in the enclosure. Big girl. Now she's not even stretched out. The enclosure is 8 inches, so she's definitely under 8 inches. I believe it's 8 inches. Maybe 9, I'll measure it afterwards. So I'm guessing about 7 inches or so, which is still a big spider. Now I know a lot of times people talk about how large these guys can get, and I have heard of ones that get up to 8, 9, 10 inches. More often than not though, they're 7 to 8, which is still a big hefty spider. There she is. Get a nice close shot and hopefully not irritate her too much that she kicks at me because I'm not wearing my gloves. L. parahybana, or the salmon bird eater. In a moment I'll stretch out her molt so we can get an idea how big she is. Beautiful girl. Alright, a quick follow-up with the dogs going crazy in the background. You see here, lined up with her front foot. About 7 inches, 6 3/4, 7 inches. Right around 7 on the nose. So she's probably about 7.5 now. We'll have to see, maybe 8. I always find it difficult to estimate the size. I either underestimate, I try not to overestimate, but it happens. So this one was actually bigger than I thought she was more like 6. So that's still a big spider. So about 7 inches total. Which is a pretty big girl. Yeah, so the plate's about 6 3/4, and she's just about the same exact size. So there we go. Salmon bird eater molted. Nice little update. Very excited about this, and give her a couple weeks to harden up. We'll start fattening her up. And while feeding today, I also discovered that my Grammostola ioringi also molted. Absolutely love this spider. I feel like I was finally able to kind of catch some of the bluish tint it has on its legs. And obviously there's that bright red abdomen. It's just such a striking spider and not your typical Grammostola species. This one's putting on some serious size now. In a moment I'll put a tape measure up to the molt, but when I got her she was about 3 inches long or so, 3.5 inches, and she's molted 3 times in my care, which is a lot for a Grammostola species. This is a larger growing, supposedly they hit 7.5, 8 inches. Grammostola species, and they also grow rather quickly, which is fantastic. So in a moment here we're going to transition over to the molt, and you can see here she's pushing about 5.5, actually right around 5.5 inches on the dot, which is pretty good size considering I've only had her for about 1.5 to 2 years. So she's put on some serious size in that amount of time. I haven't gotten a good measure on her yet. Hopefully I'll catch her doing some spider yoga later where she's stretched it all out and I can get a measurement on her. But I'm guessing probably about 6 to 6.5. She does put on some good size with each molt. And voracious eater, so we'll give her a week or so to harden up and it'll be time to start dropping crickets in there. Okay, this is going to be something new and something I've thought about doing for a while because I answer a lot of questions on both my YouTube page, through my blog comments, and through email. And some of them are fantastic questions that a lot of people have. So what I'm going to start doing is choosing a question I will ask permission first to respond to. And today's question involves blue tarantulas. So El Kukui asks, what do you recommend if someone wants one of the blue spiders, like C. levitis, H. pulchripes, P. metallica, flagella species, or P. sosme? P. metallica is my dream tarantula. Should we try one of those, or are they incredibly expensive, and we should stay away from them unless we're very experienced tarantula keepers? This is a great question because I think a lot of us are attracted to the blue spiders, as evidenced by the fact that we have species that are very readily available that still command high prices just because they're blue. The C. levitis is one that attracted my attention immediately when I first got into the hobby, but after doing research, and research is key for anybody interested in grabbing one of these blue tarantulas, I realized I wasn't ready for them. They require deep, moist substrate, and I had no experience keeping spiders that required moist substrate, and they pack a powerful bite. They're an old world species, and they're not reluctant to bite if cornered. People often comment that these guys can be as nasty as OBTs. Other species, like the Balfouri that just showed or the alveolospes that we're seeing here, can be more skittish and timid, but again, the bites are what kind of turn people off. Bottom line, you make a mistake with a New World species and get bit, it's not going to have the same consequences as if it happens with an Old World species. And so I think it comes down to people doing their research, getting their basic husbandry experience down, and knowing what they're getting into. P. metallicas are incredibly popular. I have one. She's actually a sweetheart. And in most cases, I think a lot of the Poecilotheria species get a bad rep for their temperaments. They're usually rather flee than stand their ground and bite. That said, you're going to be doing rehousings, and that's when a lot of these mishaps happen. When you're trying to rehouse them, it gets out, you panic, and suddenly somebody gets bit. And this is a species that can really knock you on your keister if you get bit by it. So P. metallica, I would say for most folks, not all, because I can't tell you what your experience limits are, should be off limits. But you can try some of the easier species. P. sasme, like we see here, can be very skittish and will throw up threat postures and kick hairs, so it's a step up, but it's not going to put a hurting on you or possibly put you in a hospital if you screw up. The GBB, or C. cyanopubescens, is another one that can be skittish, kicks a lot of hair. They're fast, so again, a step up from your normal beginner species, but would be a step in the right direction for keeping one of these faster old worlds. Then we have the D. diamantinensis, a little dwarf species that is beautiful, lots of gorgeous blues on it, but quick as lightning. So again, another step up as far as preparing you for dealing with one of these faster species. You can learn about speed and rehousing these fast ones and skittish ones without worrying about the potential of a serious bite. So again, I think this is a question that could honestly be its own feature unto itself about when to know when you're ready for some of the more advanced species. Unfortunately, for many people entering the hobby that just have a little bit of experience or haven't been doing it for a while, a lot of these old world species should be kind of off their radar until they get some experience. I usually say that until you have basic husbandry down, including rehousings where you feel comfortable transferring a spider without possibility of escape or injury, then you should probably leave these guys alone for the time being and build up to them. So I do think there's a bit of a ladder, even just in terms of the blue species, that people can easily follow to get to the point where they have the experience level to take them. And again, we have people that come from all walks of life. Some people walk right in and they're able to deal with these species right off the bat with no issues. The trick is knowing who you are, what your confidence level is, and first and foremost, doing a lot of research to be sure you're fully informed before you take that step. Okay, that's it for now. Hopefully that wasn't too tedious. Again, I usually try to do shorter videos, and I will be continuing to do the short videos in the future. This is just something I hope to do once a month to kind of pull some of the shorter ones together and have some fun doing like a monthly little update on what's going on in the hobby. So thanks for watching, and please let me know what you think in the comments.